Good morning. Y'all can face that way. We can see ourselves. See, somebody come over here by me. Hi, everybody. Let's put up a little bit more pencil, Jeff. Hi, everyone. I first want to say, if you do not want to be recorded, that you are welcome at this time to turn your camera off. We are repeating a presentation from what we were supposed to do in New York, but the technology failed us and we weren't able to record it. So they agreed to let us record it ourselves and then send it for upload to the website, which is really cool. So I just wanted to introduce all of my co-presenters with me today. I have Miss Pamela McCray, who's gonna follow my initial part of the presentation, and then Jeff is gonna bring us home with his second part of the presentation. So you all can have a seat for now, and I'll start the presentation, and you all can enjoy what we are offering to you. So I'm going to share the screen. Share. Awesome. I'm going to hide this little floating device. All right. And then from the beginning. Awesome. So this is the Learning Ideas Conference that was held in June 15th through 17th in New York at Columbia University. And our presentation was entitled Creating Affective, Collaborative Adults, Teams and Groups Guided by Spiral Dynamic Theory. And you all were given a copy of the article, which I'm sure everyone read, right? So you're ready with a boatload of wonderful questions following the presentation. So our agenda is going to begin in 3 parts. The first part, where I'm going to talk about affective collaboration, spiral dynamics in adult learning and development. And then that'll be followed by Pamela's portion, which she'll talk about theory that informs practice in higher education, constructivism and worldviews of adults, and experiential learning in teams and groups. And then Jeff is going to talk about using innovation and technology in graduate education, which is really interesting because that's the chapter we're covering today for this module. He'll also talk about diversity as additive social context, and then adult life experience and leading groups. So you all know who I am. That's a little bit of my bio. And I attended a conference this summer here in San Antonio. I think it's University of San Antonio. And so one of the presenters had this quote that I somehow never heard before, but I thought was so apropos because of the role that Benjamin Franklin plays in the history of adult education and his creation of the juntas. But he says, tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn. And that's the epitome of adult education. So our focus is what I consider to be this emerging pedagogical approach of affective learning and teaching in adult education. So when we talk about affective, we're talking about something being impacted by or influenced that such you produce emotions, moods, feelings, and attitudes. And we talked about in our class philosophical orientations in terms of what people use to determine their worldview and to interpret and negotiate the world as it relates to truth and reality. Now, when you think about effective, essentially these are actions that produce desired results or effects. So when you talk about affective adult learning in higher education, we're talking about involving us in more holistic ways in our learning and experiences. Now, affective again means to influence or to produce a change in something or someone. Like here in this little cartoon example, it shows pollution negatively affecting the environment. It almost suggests that the environment is a living thing and that this phenomenon of pollution has affected its mood, its being, its emotions, and its present, representation. So essentially saying that the earth got sad because of the pollution. In the case of effective with my lovely avocado, avocado is an impact or change or result that essentially you plan to occur. So exercise and healthy eating have positive effects on health. Now, when we talk about adult learning theories, there's a variety of ways of knowing. And this kind of creates a spectrum. We talked about philosophies, but there are also associated theories to adult learning. You see the ones we have here range from behaviorism, humanism, cognitivism, social cognitivism, and constructivism. We kind of privilege the latter part when we talk about affective knowing. But as you know, most of these theories, they're not in isolation. A lot of times you can see elements of humanism that may be a part of behavioralism. Or you can see social cognitivism being associated with constructivism. And we just had Rick do a wonderful presentation for us about construction and deconstruction in the postmodernist philosophical orientation. So when we talk about spiral dynamic theory, I think it's easy to describe it or appropriate to describe it as a constructivist mimetic type of theoretical framework. It was introduced in the early 1970s by psychologist Claire Grace, who actually was a professor at Union College in New York. And he initially called it the emergent cyclical level of existence theory, the acronym ECLED. And it's a model of adult psychosocial development. His protege subsequently shortened that name to sorts and called it spiral dynamic theory. But it's actually Claire Gray's work. Spiral dynamic theory framework uses a color-coded mnemonic device of evolving ontological worldview constructs. Let me grab my water. Sorry. It's a framework of hierarchical adult thinking that progresses from very simplistic to more complex neuropsychology and problem-solving capacity. The framework has applications in 3 domains: the individual, the organizational, and societal. And as one makes advancements on the framework, you oscillate between individualism and collectivism. Spiral dynamic theory is uniquely open-ended cognitive development model of evolving units of culture that we call memes. No open-end stage or no end stage of adult development is a part of this framework, similar to what you see with Maslow when he tries to reach self-actualization. Spiral dynamic theory holds that adult development is an open-ended process. We don't peak in our cognition at age 35, which a lot of biological models hold. Spiral dynamic theory is a comprehensive theory of adult development. It examines ways of thinking and deep value systems or worldviews. It does not explain personality traits. It does not relate to IQ or any kind of intelligence quotient instruments. It's a research conducted primarily with healthy, normal adults. So we're not looking at abnormal psychology. When we talk about levels of values, we have all of us these kind of surface values that we don't have any problems with people knowing about religious belief, obeying societal laws, and conscious common sense norms. We all have these surface values. But below the surface values, we have these hidden values. So I don't know why this room always gives me scratchy throat. Maybe I should get this going. So these hidden values are these long-standing beliefs and attitudes and traditions that we hold that are underneath the surface level. Come on, Mentos, say that. So our conscious but hidden values are beneath the visible surface. Then we have these deep values, those unconscious values that influence the hidden values. And those deep values is where we find our means. And so, memetics is a theory and form of academic study holding that mental units of culture direct human behavior within social context. Means operate and transfer through non-genetic human imitation. Now, memes mirror the biological gene construct because it uses this procreative process that we consider to be replication, variation, and natural selection. Very Darwinian nature. And we think about some of our philosophies that are Darwinian privileging, memes would find a place there. And these natural selections of these memes try to remain relevant in order to evolve. So memes can be represented as images, beliefs. The key factor is their imitations. I'm gonna advance this because my cough is getting worse. So this is the framework. On the right side, you see individualism themes. On the left, more collectivist. And here's an example, kind of like a meta view of this orange dominant meme, where these little memes help to inform the ultimate, more dominant representation of the orange meme. So this person might dominantly present as orange, but they have these kind of mini memes that inform its larger dominant presentation. So one could be red in their orientation for politics, but they'd be very blue in their orientation for family and life. Here you see the primary noble thinking that happens, or the dominance. This is just a model for clinical purposes. So even though this person, these numbers aren't absolute, they may dominate a screen, but they have influences of orange and red and those associated typologies. Again, the frame rate moves from lower order thinking in a spiral-like fashion to more complex thinking. Here you see the stages for change from one level to the next. And that was included in the article, so I won't go through each one of those. And I don't want to keep coughing. So the spiral dynamic framework operates in these three domains, as I said earlier. Usually when you see conflicts, you have the most conflict between the individualistic and the collectivist worldview. Those worldviews that tend to be horizontal to each other tend to have the most harmony. True also here, but those that are vertical to each other tend to have the most conflict. In what ways might we appropriate and pass our deep values and cultural beliefs in the context of higher education? Well, Pam is going to explain that to us.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Brown, and thank you to all of you for being here and the opportunity to talk to you tonight. When Dr. Brown first introduced the spiral dynamic framework to our class, I have to say I was really excited and I was intrigued. First of all, because it is a very comprehensive theory, but it has a very simplistic approach, and I like the way it linked psychosocial, also the social context and cultural context, and also our own worldviews and opinions. And I thought that was very important. In my background, I was an executive with business and technology. And so I wanted to go ahead and start reflecting and think about those people that were very important to me in my professional and my influential personal life. What level did they fit on? And I have to tell you, the levels of red and orange got packed pretty quickly. And then I turned to myself. How would I look at myself? What level would I be on? And you as my colleagues and even my family, how would you assess? And so the deep reflection actually gave me, it gave me a lot to think about, but also, as Dr. Brown mentioned, it made me also realize that the model has a direct connection and really the foundational elements of constructivism and experiential learning. And so we'll take a little bit further dive into that. So first of all, let's begin with constructivism. As educators, we're all aware of constructivism. It's the theory of how we learn. However, for us to learn, something has to happen. I mean, there has to be an event. And we, as educators, are those people that have to make sure that we are instigating something that creates a new idea or a new experience. So invoking those mental processes for our adult learners is really critical. And when we first do that, most of our learners, if we're giving them some new information, there's dissonance. That's not what I understand. So then we start the process of how do I cognitively start problem solving? And so all of us as learners, we start looking at, well, what does this information say? Is it new information? Do I need to try to fit it into my existing schema? Is it different information that now I'm going to have to make some room for this? I got to modify something. But again, we as instructors are critical here. We have to guide our students through this dissonance process because we need to get to equilibrium. And in order to get to equilibrium, as we've talked about the different levels and some changes, I got to either change what I believe, I can either reject, or I need to modify. Maybe I need to integrate. And again, a very important point here is us as educators need to facilitate and help our students reach that equilibrium. Also, what's really important is we're also in a wonderful position. Technology can help enable this process with us. If you think about it, even if we're in this class, we have people joining us online. They might even be around the world. So we've got a lot of resources that are outside of the confines of our classroom. Also, as educators, we know the importance of our learners in self-direction and their experience that they have in solving real world problems. This is how we all show up, and this is how our students come to us. However, when you start thinking about new knowledge or new experiences, again, we also need to be very aware of the impact of culture, what that has, again, psychosocial realities, and even an environmental impact. And a simple example I'll give here, it actually kind of ties back with Dr. Brown was talking about memes. We're Texans, so we all live here. If we love our trucks, we love our cars, but if we were to go on a trip to Tokyo, we probably wouldn't be renting a car. We'd probably be using mass transportation because first of all, we're not going to understand the traffic signals, most of us. We're not going to understand, again, those memes, units of culture are really showing up. And even the different languages, again, is part of our learning. And also just the fact that mass transportation, I can get on a train and basically go anywhere I want. So I can guarantee you, I may not be used to that, but when I leave Japan or you leave Japan, those social and cultural influences are going to be affecting our learning process. We may come back and say, okay, I live in San Antonio. When are we going to get that high-speed train going to Austin? Or when are we going to get that going from the airport? So again, I think you can see just from that example that constructivism, again, ties right into what we're talking about with the spiral dynamic theory. First thing, you're going to acquire new insights. Problem recognized, dissidence. I need to solve that. And then hopefully you'll be looking at some additional clarity. And then as you start thinking about the options, barriers are removed, and then you're able to go forward and take action. So those changes are what also tie in with the spiral dynamic framework of either moving to a new level or maybe digressing to a level. So we all know that constructivism informs student engagement. And what I want to point out here is technology has been involved in adult education for a long time, not new. However, over the last few years, we all know with COVID and certainly with emergency remote training, all of our worlds changed, and it also impacted adult education. There were a lot of challenges, but I'm also going to contend that there's also a silver lining. That actually fueled innovation. It actually made us as educators figure out new ways to create learning environments. And I will tell you that the innovative instructors like Dr. Brown that you have here, they actually embraced different pedagogy. They actually looked at flipped classrooms. They actually recorded videos. And also the literature tells us that there's very positive influences from that. Because if you're a student and I can go back and now look at a video of a synchronous recording, or at least get some hints from you before I start my assignment, I can go hone in on that. And I may need to play that a couple times to really understand what you're asking me to do. And that's especially powerful for students that English is a second language. Also, what was found is that students that have learning disabilities also were able to go back and look at the lessons and apply their own learnings. And another positive experience is when the instructors would tie a discussion with the videos, but it wasn't just with the instructor, that they would open it up to community. That also made for very powerful learning experiences. So again, I contend that technology has actually helped fuel adult education, but one very important thing is that we're all still very complex. New technology is hard to learn. So as we are working with adult learners, and we're all adult learners, people need to meet us, and we need to meet our students at their level of complexity. Otherwise, there's going to be a real challenge in trying to use technology, like the examples I just shared with you. And one of my favorite topics, especially this summer, since I've been in Dr. Sinclair's practicum with experiential learning, is I will say that I've become very impressed. I've actually learning the process of learning, which I think often we go through, we might go through the process, but we haven't really learned how do I go through the complete cycle. So therefore, experiential learning is very holistic. And again, it ties right in with the spiral dynamic theory that we're talking about. And again, if we look at the interpretation, we have needs. Again, that's certainly an experiential learning. When you reflect, you do a little bit deeper abstract conceptualization. And then it helps prepare you to take that active experimentation. And then you go back and reflect. Did it work? Did it not work? What do I need to do? And one of the most exciting things about experiential learning that I learned in Dr. Brown's class, actually, and it's been reinforced in Dr. Sinclair's, is actually that metacognitive process and that systematic learning actually creates new neurological connections. And I say hallelujah on that. I mean, this old dog can get some more connections. That's a great opportunity for all of us. So again, I look at this and it also helps us if you think about the spiral dynamic framework. As we synthesize, as we reflect, and as we take other people's worldviews, I think it makes us a better adult citizen. If I can look at the level I'm on, and then I can look up, and I can even look back, I might understand a little bit more about your worldview or your behaviors if I've been there, or at least I have a deeper understanding of where you're coming from and where maybe I've been, and I'm afraid I don't want to slip back there. Okay, so in summary, we've all gone through a lot as far as the different modalities, but I will continue to support that. I think adult education, certainly online learning, it's growing, it's not going away. And so high flex, online learning, so all of us in this room, even those listening to this video, you need to really think about that. And so how are you going to apply innovative pedagogy? And how are you going to become the best digital facilitator? That takes thinking, that takes skills, that doesn't just happen. You can't take your class material from either a high flex or an online or an in-person class and just simply throw it online and think that you're going to have the same learning process with your learners. And again, we keep coming back to this contextual social interactions. Cultural activities matter. We all live in different environments and we need to be respectful. We live in a very global, diverse environment. We need to take that more into account. We all have personal learning styles. We don't all learn the same. So again, we now have some tools, we got a little practice under our belt that we can continue. So what I'm going to leave with you before I turn it to my esteemed colleague, Jeffrey, is again, this is my challenge to you. I used to say my call to action when I was in sales. The critical role of adult educators. The environment you create for your adult students may be the only safe haven they have to come and practice or express their opinions and worldviews. They may not feel comfortable sharing that at home or with their friends. So giving them the ability to have healthy discourse and be able to share and even integrate, I think will make all of us much better students. And again, that adult citizens. And also I'm going to encourage you, please think about the spiral dynamic framework. Think about the constructivist examples. Think about experiential learning and how you can actually help people learn to learn. So thank you for your time. And now I'm going to turn the podium over to Jeffrey, who's going to tell you how the real technology and team dynamics is for adult learning.
Thanks, Pam and Dr. Brown for a good segue into coming to speak about innovation and the tools that we'll use as adult learners. My background, I am a veteran, retired Air Force, and I consider myself a lifelong learner. I didn't do that until I started going to school here at UIW, but I really do consider myself a lifelong learner and coming in contact with different people. Because when you come in contact with different people, you're going to learn their culture, you're going to learn their language, you're going to learn their lingo, and you're going to learn their mannerisms. So that's kind of where I come from. I'll start this off with talking about the innovation and technology in graduate education. So as Pam alluded to earlier, the educator has to take firm control of the classroom. And that goes for whether you're in person or whether you're online or whether you're doing asynchronous after the fact. So what we find is Miriam and Barima define the affective student as one that has the human phenomenon, the moods, the attitudes, and then it comes with a collective embodied learning skill set that each of us as students have. I'm going to speak to you as the student, your peers. The other two are educators. I'm still trying to get there. And so, and that goes on to the professor having to understand the student themselves and their culture. So that's where the diversity comes into it. Diversity doesn't always have to deal with, your color, your language, but it's being flexible. I can't make it to class sometime, I'm running late. So you reach out to someone that you met in class that is not of your culture or your race or your age group. And you reach out to them as a lifeline and say, hey, can you let the professor know I'm running late? I think that happened today. So moving forward, the worldviews of a graduate student within a team setting. You gotta have relationships. You're gonna have the conscious and the non-conscious lens, but you have to remove your blinders and treat everyone equal, both online and in the classroom. I'm excited today or tonight because this is the first time I've been in a classroom in a long time. I think the last time I was in a classroom, I was with Luciano. 2019, 2020, right? And so, and I use Luciano because that increases my aperture of understanding another individual, culture, race, educational level, all because we're challenging ourselves to be excellent within a team setting. Now, Hillary provides a model for understanding learning. I'm not going to go over the entire model that's on screen here, but I'd like for you to pay close attention to the internal conditions and the external conditions, because that's going to ground you in your concepts of being in an online environment, using technology and innovation within education. Because, as both Dr. Brown and Pam alluded to, this is an organic process from experiential learning, from your own view. Your views or your view you share with me, and I share with someone else, and collectively we become a team in order to reach one goal. That, my friends and my students, I say that that's innovative techniques in higher education. The spiral dynamic oscillating depiction here, it's going to lead me to a case study, so to speak, about myself. Being in a classroom. It was this same classroom, I think about 2019, 2020, that I sat in the classroom and I sat by different students, international, domestic, first time generation students, minority students. And what I found was, through a piece of candy, my brother from Saudi Arabia and my other brother from Uganda, we all became good friends. And I think they leaned toward me more or less because I was a veteran and kind of like being in charge, so to speak. But I had to remove that because I'm in a school setting and I wanted their inputs. I mean, yes, I'm an American, but I still want your inputs because you have a holistic view that's totally different from mine. And so through that, we used the spiral dynamic theory chart to oscillate, to go up and down. There was flexibility. And to this day, I'm still in contact with them to understand each other as far as the spiral dynamics theory. Now, Johnson & Johnson says, within the spiral dynamics theory and meeting goals, we need to be able to create problem solving, which is, deconflictions, and we're gonna have disagreements, but we still have to get along. And as professionals, we need to be able to do that. Increases cognitive and moral reasoning. Again, you have to be able to understand the students that you're with, your peers in the classroom, as well as online. So what happens sometimes is you could be online and you could be in your separate chat, and it takes away from the classroom. Even though we can't see it, but it does take away. That leads me into talking about the net etiquette rules that go along with being online and being in a classroom environment. I always like to say, be professional. You're gonna have anxiety. I had anxiety probably about 30 minutes ago. But I went back and I got my identity, and that's what you have to do within the net etiquette. You have to be polite. You all are being polite in this environment, and my fellow peers are being polite in an online environment. I would like to sum it up real quick. The innovation and technology within the classroom. I don't know how many of you knew this classroom, this very classroom, about 3 years ago. None of this was in here. It was a very stoic and archaic classroom. So if you look at some of the hardware that's in this room, the screws are still new. So that means that we adapted as a university to educate our adult learners more. With that, I turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. As y'all can see, I was very blessed to have this level of talent and intelligence to work on this presentation, which I'm very grateful for. They cover so many of the key aspects of teaching adults in effective ways. And a lot of times you'll hear that meme, sometimes when you're in discussion, don't be so emotional. Why are you so emotional? Emotions are important. Emotions are a part of who we are, and emotions are a part of helping us learn ourselves and learning each other. So, you know, be cognizant of some of the memes that circulate around them. Be critical and deconstruct them. And don't make assumptions about the learning that you're going to have. Be in the moment sometimes, and you'll find sometimes you'll have conflict, not always able to resolve them because people are at different levels of their understanding and their views of the world. And so to the degree that you can be aware and conscious of what Pam talked about, being able to see yourself in the past in that person and trying to meet where they're at as they're learning is very, very important. One of the things that Jeff talked about in his last segment was innovative pedagogy. Yeah, innovative pedagogy. That's one of the things you guys are doing now, which I charge you to do, how we join Twitter, right? So we're going into these spaces, these Twitter spaces, and listening to what people say. And some of it could be shocking, but you'll have to look at it in the perspective of the spiral. And y'all haven't really learned spiral dynamics until today, but you're looking at it in terms of the philosophical orientations that adults are operating in. And you will find it very fascinating to see how conflicts arise because of these different value systems, perspectives about the world, and notions of reality and truth. So the key takeaways: virtual communication and the use of technology in higher education are the future, like what Pam talks about. Online informal adult learning is an emerging supplementary component to formal higher education. Jeff kind of talked about the sage on the stage tradition we've had with education. That's something that we don't necessarily promote in adult education because we understand that each adult is coming in with their own rich experience and we want to capitalize on that. So I don't have all knowledge as a professor. And in terms of my approaches, which seem to be along the spectrum of radical critical, we see the adults as co-learners with us. And you actually build relationships in that way. I don't know what I'm gonna do when I have to move on to something else. So used to Pam and Jeff now, but it's just, they're not getting away from me anymore. In fact, as a result of our article and this presentation, we got invited to write another article. So we're really excited about that. Leading instruction in virtual spaces of communication requires critical thinking skills. And we talked about that already. Spiral dynamic theory assessments can help teams and groups collaborate effectively. If you know you have someone who's very centered in a blue perspective or very centered in a red or orange perspective, they may not be the best grouping to come together. So you may, depending on what the project is, need to reassess how you align people in groups to perform certain tasks and projects. Deep values and mimetic beliefs are powerful change initiators. And that one slide that talks about how change occurs in these kind of 6 steps, change is not inevitable. That's something that Claire Grace talked about. That you can have someone who live out the whole of their existence for one particular worldview, and we should be able to be okay with people like that. So it is not uncommon also before you enter into a new level of existence or a new paradigm shift that you may have some regression. Because initially you're faced with a new dilemma that you've never had before. And it's not uncommon for a person to regress, but then they'll say, no, this problem solving capacity skill is not going to work with this new problem. Then you provide the supportive structures that are listed in that steps by removing barriers, providing new insight points that allows that person to progress to the next level. But also us being aware that at that particular time and moment, they may remain stagnant. So our call to action is that as you work as facilitators with adult educators, that you incorporate innovative adult learning pedagogy, like we did with our introducing, Twitter Spaces into this course. Read our upcoming Springer article, which you already had to do, and explore more deeply spiral dynamic theory and attempt to self-assess yourself. I have an instrument that I will make available at some point after I tweak it a little bit more. And so similar to how we test our philosophies at the beginning, you'll be able to see where you're at spiral dynamic. And also follow, like us on Twitter and LinkedIn. So with that, that's the end of our presentation. Are there any questions or any comments? Yeah, okay, thank you.
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
Your spiral dynamic theory, very new to grad school, so I'm like still in the beige. So my questions are kind of.
No, you're not in the beige. You are.
I have 3 questions actually. 2 are very just straightforward answer, which is I've read when you talked about spiral dynamic theory last semester a little bit, and then I was reading this, and so I just wondered the letters that are after the colors, like AN after beige and BO after purple. What are those?
Yes. So this first letter represents the kind of neuropsychology you have, and then N is the kind of problem you're facing. So in order to resolve N type of problems, you have A type of neuropsychology. When you get a new kind of problem, an O type of problem, you will need to develop a B type of neuropsychology. So it's a kind of constant permutation. So I hope I'm not getting these mixed up. A psychology, N problem resolved, then B problem comes, or you're introduced to another problem that requires a B psychology to respond to the O problem. So, so it's designed to show you, this is a neuropsychology, this is the problem. You get a new problem and it requires a new neuropsychology to resolve it. So it speaks to your capacity to problem solve a particular problem. But when a new problem emerges, you have to develop a new neuropsychology. Did you have another question?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So much. Okay, that helps. You mentioned earlier when you were talking, you said that there's no peak, like self-actualization. Like you said, at 35, there's no peak or whatever. So does that mean that there's no peak at all?
That's what Claire Grace held. He said that as adults, we have an open-ended capacity to continue our levels of complexity. And that as we resolve each problem, we by nature as human beings create other problems. So it's similar to what you asked me about the letters, that as we resolve problems, we create new ones, and we need to develop a new neuropsychology in order to resolve that. That's why you keep on with the never-ending capacity for complexity, growth, and development. He felt like there was no peaking of adult development. And as I said before, most books that deal with biology at one time, even those are starting to walk it back, indicate that human cognition peaks at 35. But we're seeing, because of seniors who remain engaged and the boomers getting older and finding things to do, whether it involves lifelong learning or more informal learning. So there is this human capacity to continue to expand what Pam talked about, our neuroplasticity and our mind's ability to create new connections, indicating new learning for us as adults.
So is it that neuroplasticity could, instead of 35 be a peak, maybe now it's 75 is a peak?
From what I'm seeing, I think, because it's a biopsychosocial system framework, right? So our social environment impacts things as well. This is the population, like the baby boomers are starting to go on to heaven, but that was a real significant large group that we never saw before. So we didn't know how they were going to be like in aging and retirement. And we're starting to see that now. And so because we have improvements in medical care, we're starting to see people have a better quality of life as elders. And so they don't want to be in nursing homes and expiring away in a quarter. They want to live life and want to have experience. They want to travel. They want to take college classes, And so that's what we're seeing. And I think it's consistent with the idea that peaking at 35 is no longer the expectation. I think at one time, it probably was like a social mean. I mean, how many years ago was it that we expired at 45 years old? That was the height of human life. But now we can live well into our 80s and 90s and be relatively healthy if we take care of ourselves at that time. And so being healthy and being excited about life, and depending on your worldview, of course, you can remain excited until, the chariot come and pick you up, or wherever you believe, or wherever you believe you're gonna go after, the end of the physical world existence.
I also, I'm sorry, go ahead. I was just going. I also think that technology has expanded the elastic, so to speak, to where the older people are more involved in life occurrences with technology.
Mhm.
That'd be in education, just life occurrences.
Yeah, I mean, we are all almost forced into technology, because who doesn't have a smartphone, right? I mean, we all started, I didn't have one when I was in graduate school. My daughter said, Mommy, can you give me an iPhone in case I'm going in to talk to a judge? I can Google real quick about them. I said, oh, say less. Yes, get one. And then she got me one for my birthday. I said, what am I supposed to do with this? Now, I mean, I literally sleep with it next to me because I'm listening to Twitter Space before I go to bed. And we all kind of evolved to that. Adults typically have been technology averse, but depends on how they engage in technology. You can't tear my mother away from her games on her phone now, but she will get upset about trying to do a text message. So, it really depends on what kind of supports we give people in informal ways and learning the technologies they need to live their daily lives. And then you have some adults who will initiate. Remember, experiential learning is largely based on the motivation of the adult learner. So if you're motivated about it, you'll be coming in here working on tech with us. I mean, we have tech people here at UIW, they're not very young, a little older, because that's the area of interest that they've, increased their learning about it.
Okay. And then I had a third question. You were talking about, you said that there are some people who never move up to a level, you said, and quote unquote, we should be okay with that. So if we're not okay with that, does that mean that we're hindering ourselves from moving up to a different level?
I think you're gonna experience some of
Would
this.
stay on that same level where we are because we can't adjust to what other people are doing. So our worldview is minimized as well, or?
It really depends on the person, right? Okay, so you can have somebody, I always use the Homer Simpson analogy.
Okay.
Now, they are very satisfied going to work every day, and if they could take their children to SeaWorld once a year, they feel like they're dad of the year. They don't have any aspirations to be president of the United States or CEO of a big Fortune 500 corporation. We have to be okay with that. You can't say everyone has to achieve these lofty, subjective goals of what makes you a valuable person in the world. You have to let people set that for themselves. At the same time, I'm the first person who will tell people, everybody not gonna make it to where you're going. And you have to be okay with that. That's when we get into the adulting part. We want to sometimes control the destinies of others, especially when we care about them, but we have to set the reality that that's not your role. because if you do, you're looking at blue, right? When you look at dogmatic absolutism, where people become authoritarian and they feel in their mind for the betterment and well-being of you and everyone else, I have to control what you do. And I could do that through rules. I could do that through means of what I consider truth and right or righteousness and impose them on you. But to me, and this is me going like, I'll make no bones about the fact that I'm a Christian. There's certain scriptures to me in the way that I would look at the life of Jesus, because I consider him like the ultimate adult educator. The Bible says where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's liberty. Where does that say you control other people? Even the whole concept of the born again salvation experience is one you self-volunteer for. God ain't came down here with no lightning bolt saying, you gotta be this, you gotta be that. Information, the table is set before you and the invitation is extended. There's some marketing, but ultimately the decision is up to you. And that's why I like spiral dynamic theory, because I think it speaks in the same way, that you come into a new knowledge or a new worldview or new exposures by way of the people you meet. And then us as adults, we use critical theory to determine if what these truth modules that people are presenting to us is something we want to accept and grow from or reject and go in a different direction. But ultimately, these systems are subsuming, like Pam talked about. They become a part of who we are, and we draw on them to the degree that we need to. I still have further research to do about how distant can we get from them. If I'm at level 2, if I'm at tier 2, what's considered the being level, and I'm looking at holistic globalism, how much will I relate to this person who operates by power dynamics? That's the next level of research for me to do. Look at those kind of conflicts and tensions where I see between those persons who exist like this, and at various stages. And as I said before, you tend to see the most harmony between those people who are more vertical in alignment. I'm sure that has something to do with this whole notion of individualism and collectivism. But you also see the most harmony between those, conflict between those who are far from, vertical from each other. So I use the Zuckerberg analogy when I'm describing this kind of worldview. And here you're looking at Game of Thrones, But this particular worldview with this red power impulsive has a certain level of admiration for this one with the strategic orange absolutist worldview. Is that this person doesn't care about making enemies. This person cares about making enemies because they're trying to move in a very clandestine way, but they very much are concerned about power, gaining material possessions, and being in control. This one just results more to domination and force. This one in orange results more to strategic materialism and manipulation. Anybody from Zoom got a question? Are y'all still there?
Yes, I get apparently Marissa doesn't want to use her voice. So she asked me to ask y'all, what are some criticisms of this theory?
Which one?
Spiral dynamic theory. What are some of the criticisms?
Yeah, some people really have a hard time believing that these worldview constructs exist this neatly. And they're rightfully so to hold that concern. I don't know why because typically most people aren't centered in a particular worldview. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, it was this one. So we talk about how you have these little memes that inform who we are. That's why people get kind of confused about a particular worldview that a person holds. Because you can be very red in your position about sports. We're gonna kill them on Saturday, let's destroy the Bears, But then you could be very, bourgeois in your social movements, cheese and crackers, you know, but your dominant representation falls along the lines of the description from the orange worldview, even though you have these elements that are informing your larger metame, you know. So some people have a problem of, you know, believing that these worldview constructs exist so smoothly, or that they themselves are assessed to have that particular positionality. Say, for example, a person believes that all of your life is predestined and you have no control over it. You may be more blue oriented and think, well, whatever's going to happen to me is going to be a function of what God wants to do. And so that particular person would have a hard time with someone who believes that you kind of are the captain of what happens, that you have control. And that might be more present among the person here, or even here. So if you hear a blue and you say, well, I'm gonna do, you know, with the Lord, whatever he let happen. And so you may not engage in some activism that might allow you to have the results that you need to see. You know, you might say, for example, go vote and hope that the best happens. Or someone else here might hire a lobbyist and make sure they get the policy that they want. So those kind of things, sometimes people have a hard time believing exist. I think, I don't know of a lot of criticisms. Most of the time when I tell people about spiral dynamic theory, they're like, oh my gosh, this is so wonderful. Everyone should know about this. I always kind of slick, jokingly say, spiral dynamic theory explains everything that all the theories just didn't get done. Because ironically, Maslow was a friend of Claire Gray's. And he talks about, and I think I wrote about in the article, how when he met Maslow, he was getting laughed out of the APA meeting with his theory of, you know, the hierarchy. And because of that experience, Claire Grace is very adamant about making sure that when he did present this, that was strongly undergirded by empirical research and study. But he didn't publish a lot. That's the only thing. He had all of these unfinished manuscripts. And so I've just like read just about everything that he's produced. And so that's why I feel very excited and confident. And his proteges, I was taught in their workshop in California about spiral dynamic theory, and I felt a lot of times I could have taught some at the workshop. But one of his proteges, which was Chris Cohen, who was one of the co-authors of the book Spiral Dynamics, we became kind of like fast friends, and I would email him about stuff that were going on out in the political sphere, you know, with the election of Obama and when he was running for office. And when I was down in Chile, I was really excited to tell him how I used it for my study. And I came back and found out he had got pancreatic cancer. He went really quickly, I think 5 months. But I did a dedication to him in my dissertation. So hopefully he's in heaven and got to look down and see my dissertation. Any other questions? All right, guys, well, I'm gonna close it right there. And thank you, Zoom room folks, and everybody that we can share this with our colleagues. Benjamin, I might need your help. It's not closing for me. Oh, there it goes. So we're gonna stop recording, stop sharing.